As usual, this is a reminder this video is part 3 of a series. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2 yet, links are down below. And we're off. I'd like to start this video off by saying, I'm sorry this took longer than expected. Initially, I completed a script and recorded it, but while I was in the middle of editing, I realized my ideas weren't going to work. So I decided to start from scratch. Also, I posted a thread on the Steam forums to share my ideas with the community, so I'd like to thank the following people for giving me their feedback. And with that preamble out of the way, it's time to get started. A common criticism I've heard for Serious Sam 4, besides the technical issues and photorealistic blunder, is that Sam is stuck in the past and has refused to evolve.
Serious Sam 4 asks the question, what if game design stood still for 19 years? Have the boomers who played and loved the original Serious Sam been frozen in cryosleep all that time, completely unawares of Call of Duty, Halo, Doom, Wolfenstein, and a plethora of other first-person shooters that have advanced the genre over the last 2 decades? More fundamental is the circle-strafing, backwards-running combat that characterized a lot of early 2000s action shooters and is still just untouched here. Circle strafing is exactly that, constantly strafing in a circle because enemy AI isn't smart enough to throw projectiles where you're going to be, meaning that if you circle strafe, you're essentially invulnerable in most cases. The running backwards thing really takes on new meaning in a post-Doom 2016 era. Id Software famously coined the term push-forward combat, which is a focus on the player building forward momentum through glory kills, providing health and ammo sustain. It was a tactic designed to stop people from just hanging back and picking off enemies at a distance. Serious Sam has always been, and is still, the exact opposite of that. You are always just pushing the S key here, running backwards in a slight circle to avoid the swarms of enemies trying to give you dynamite-infused hugs. This is ultimately the key failure of Serious Sam 4, the failure to evolve in any way this specific part of the gameplay loop. You can look at games like Dynasty Warriors or Hyrule Warrior, whatever it's called, and see a template for how a hero unit can survive against hundreds of enemies without giving ground. If you'd have taken something like that, combined it with some Doom 2016, maybe thrown in some DMC-inspired spectacle fighter razzle-dazzle, you could have had a formula that kept the focus on utter mayhem, but that made the player feel like they were doing more than just that backwards ice skating thing.
To address this criticism, if Sam were to follow Dugai's footsteps in becoming a push-forward game, Croteam would be better off creating an entirely new IP. The serious formula of fighting legions of simple-minded enemies is essential to Sam's identity, and it can't change. But what can be changed and improved on are the weapons, level design, and the new mechanics that Serious Sam 4 brought to the table. That's what I'm going to do in this video. To start off, the major issues from Serious Sam 4 need to be addressed. The first is the technical issues. Because of the rocky development, the deadline for releasing on Stadia, and the pandemic, it's clear Croteam were unable to playtest or tweak the game to their liking in time. So, having a clear development plan and having enough time is a given. But there's some details I'd like to discuss. First off, resources. I touched on this in the previous video a little bit. Croteam is only a team of 40 people, yet they went for everything. Cutscenes, massive environments, photorealistic graphics, and the Legion system. And from the results, it's clear their resources were spread too thin for their ambitions. But with the news that Croteam have officially tied the knot with Devolver Digital, perhaps this could mean they can get the resources they need to meet their ambitions. Still, the core features that were lacking in Serious Sam 4, the level design and enemy placement, need to be the priority. Secondly, if they're going to go for cutscenes or ambitious new features, they need to make sure they have the resources and time to make them acceptable by AA standards. Moreover, I believe a final improvement that should be made is with the engine. Since 2001, the Serious engine has been upgraded for each Sam game. However, there were several features that were lost over the years. After I posted my first review, I got constructive pushback to play the classic encounters. When I did, I realized that the classics had wacky gravity bending segments that the HD remakes couldn't do. So, my proposal is instead of simply upgrading the engine, Croteam should take the time to completely overhaul the engine. That way, it can improve the graphical fidelity of Serious Engine 4 and be able to have the gravity bending physics of Serious Engine 1. Hopefully with increased funds from Devolver, and the future revenue from the Talos Principle 2, Croteam can lay a solid foundation for their games and ambitions. Also, Croteam should embrace an art style that's easy on the eyes and not too taxing on the environmental artists. I'd say something like the HD encounters mixed with military sci-fi. With that out of the way, it's time to talk about the setting and the story. While I enjoyed the story in Serious Sam 4, I could definitely see why people thought it was cringy.
Yeah! That's right, you sons of bitches! I fuck Metal! I fuck your whole army! Come at me, you alien pendejos! You want Mexican? I got Mexican! You want American? I got American! Y'all wanna bite me? Come get your chile con carnage!
So, to address this issue, we need to establish the setting. Since Crow Team is ashamed of Serious Sam 2 and no longer considers it canon, Serious Sam 5 will be the direct sequel to the second encounter. The story will begin when Sam wakes up from his cryopod and his ship crash lands onto an unknown planet. After fighting off Mental's scouting party, Sam will encounter the alien resistance that was hinted by Charlie in Serious Sam 4. Instead of finding 5 pieces of a medallion, Sam will go on missions of attrition against Mental's top generals. Once the generals are defeated, the resistance will prepare for the final assault on the planet Sirius. But unlike Serious Sam 4, Sam will mostly be alone this time. Instead of going for a story with banter between squad mates, the story will be like Doom Eternals. A simple story with funny one-liners, with the rest of Jonas Kyratzis' talent being put into the lore. This way, enthusiasts can invoke Nitrissa to read about the universe while casuals can get to the good stuff without being interrupted. As for the lore, it can expand the history and culture of the alien resistance and those serving in Mental's army. Also, this will be great to learn about the history of the Syrians. What were they like? How big was their influence on the galaxy? And most importantly, what led to their downfall? And if it's not too much to ask for, we can learn how Mental came into being. And speaking of Mental, this will be a golden opportunity to build up on something that Serious Sam 4 teased. In the biography section of Nitrissa, Sam's profile says that he was the one who discovered Mental and accidentally awoke him from his slumber early. So basically, it's Sam's fault that humanity is extinct and his relationship with Mental is personal. Perhaps this action hero persona is to hide Sam's guilt, and this mission is his chance at redemption. But since this is a boomer shooter, this information will be conveyed in journal entries at the end of each mission. Once again, enthusiasts will get what they want, while the casuals will be uninterrupted. This setting will also address the lackluster level design of Serious Sam 4. Hopefully with the overhauled engine I talked about, this will mean more exotic levels akin to the original encounters. Open areas, wide corridors, enclosed arenas, swimming sections, trap dodging sections, platforming sections, bowling alleys, and even gimmick levels. But absolutely no bouncing castles. Instead, good gimmick levels will have clever uses of gravity or triggerable traps the player can use against enemies. Hopefully, the better levels can make up for the unaltered Sirius formula. Sorry Skill Up, but you're not going to turn Serious Sam into Sam May Cry. And speaking of the Sirius formula, it's time to talk about the ingredients that'll make up this version of the dish. But before we do, I need to share something with you all. The reason I chose to make a pitch for Serious Sam 5 was because of my experience with BFE Fusion and the BFE Devolved mod. Consider this section a mini review for both versions. Back in my first video, I said Serious Sam 3 was the weakest of the original trilogy because of slow reloading, low clip sizes, and cheap level design. But after some constructive pushback to try the Fusion version, the little improvements really added up despite my doubts. Reloading for the AR and shotgun is quicker and the clip sizes are larger. Plus, being able to reload while sprinting does wonders to make the combat less of a hassle. I even managed to get through the last 3 levels on hard without the level of frustration I had in vanilla. But the scarcity of the laser rifle and the sniper rifle still don't make sense to me. However, when I played the Devolved mod, it was like I was playing the best version of Serious Sam 3. For those who don't know, the Devolved mod makes slight changes to the mechanics, levels, and weapons of BFE Fusion. But the biggest factor that inspired this video is the removal of reloading from every weapon besides the pistol. Without reloading, the game becomes like classic Serious Sam, a fast-paced action shooter without any relent. No joke, when I played Guardian of Time and Devolved, it was just as fun as the Grand Cathedral, and that's because you have all the weapons at your disposal and you don't stop firing because you never reload. So that's what my main goal for Serious Sam 5 is, to follow one core tenet of Doom Guy: no more reloading. So, with that goal in mind, let's set up the arsenal. The first weapon you will receive in the game will be the melee weapon. A small criticism I've seen for Serious Sam 4 is that they prefer the sledgehammer over the combat knife. Well, I figured out why it was the knife, to accommodate dual wielding. So, I'm going to make the hard choice and remove dual wielding for reasons I'll explain later. So, instead of a knife, slot 1 will be a two-handed melee weapon powerful enough to take out a clear. But it won't be a sledgehammer, it'll be a sword. But not just any sword, Excalibur. Yeah, in addition to finding the Holy Grail, Sam also found Excalibur lying around on the secondary ship. Also, since we're going to remove dual wielding, we're going to double down on weapon mods. For the sword, halfway through the game, it will be given the ability to deflect enemy projectiles and bullets back to sender. This way you can get out of sticky situations when you're cornered by a major biomechanoid or overwhelmed by a volley of clear chain balls. The next weapon is the Deagle. It'll act the same way as it does in the previous iterations, but it will have neither recoil nor bloom. Those mechanics will no longer be in Serious Sam. Instead, each weapon will have a unique reticle to make each weapon distinct. For the pistol's weapon mod, or rather equivalent of a weapon mod, you'll be able to hold a second Deagle like the revolvers in the original encounters. The next weapon is the pump-action shotgun. It was good in Serious Sam 4. However, I'm just going to make a small increase to the weapon's fire rate based on my experience with other variations. For its weapon mod, I felt that the grenade launcher attachment became redundant because Sam already has a grenade launcher in his arsenal. Instead, because I'm going to remove the auto shotgun to commit to no more reloading, the pump action will gain the auto fire mod like in Doom Eternal. But to make sure the auto fire mode won't overshadow the regular fire mode like the death ray did to the laser rifle, there will be a wind-up period. This way, you'll need to commit to pouring a steady stream of buckshot into your enemies instead of burst firing, but there won't be a speed penalty or aiming penalty like in Doom Eternal. The next weapon that will be given a mod will be the double barrel shotgun, but instead of giving the weapon a meat hook, we'll give it something that works for the Serious formula. Midway through the game, the double barrel will become a quad barrel. This way, it can fire 2 rounds twice before needing to rechamber. This will simulate dual wielding the gun like in Serious Sam 4. Also, you can hit the alternate fire button to fire all 4 rounds at once and rechamber right away. These additions will address my gripe I had in the first and second encounter to have the shotguns be viable against the late game hordes. The next weapon is the Tommy gun. Unlike Serious Sam 4, there is no bloom and no clip size, only 500 rounds and a precise reticle. This weapon's upgrade will be a scope. This will emphasize its role for precision automatic fire. Next is the minigun. Before I tell you what the weapon mod will be, I'd like to address a criticism some people had. Many felt that having 1,000 rounds was too much for the minigun. Well, the reason why it was increased to 1,000 is because it needed more ammo to be dual wielded without having your ammo evaporate. However, for the weapon mod I have in mind, it will warrant at 1,000 rounds. The mod is being able to dual wield it by holding down the alternate fire button like akimbo SMGs in Shadow Warrior. As for the too many rounds problem, each ammo pickup will be 100 rounds instead of 200. Lastly, its reticle will be as wide as its maximum bloom in Serious Sam 4. This way, the minigun will be about pure bullets, while the Tommy gun will be about precision. The next weapon is the rocket launcher. It will still have its lock-on feature, but the rocket speed will be increased by default. Next is the grenade launcher. It will be the same with the cluster grenade function. Now we're at the tricky part of the arsenal. Initially, I was going to remove the Devastator because I felt it was too overpowered in BFE and 4. The issue I had with it is that it basically makes the rocket launcher and sniper rifle redundant because of its extremely fast projectiles and scope. It even has a larger ammo capacity than both the rocket launcher and sniper rifle combined. But due to feedback I got from the forum posts, the community really wants it to stay. To the fans, the role of the Devastator is to quickly splatter zealots, biomechs, and other medium enemies, while the rocket launcher will take care of more powerful and mobile targets with its lock-on feature. But because I don't want reloading and want the rocket launcher and sniper rifle to be relevant, I'm going to have the Devastator function like its BFE fusion counterpart, where it pierces through enemies without having a scope and only having 50 rounds. Also, the ratio of Devastator rounds and rockets in the game will be 1 to 2. Lastly, it will have no weapon mod. It's already powerful enough. The next weapon is the chainsaw launcher. From the forum post, most players think the weapon is overpowered, but since I have a soft spot for the weapon, I'm going to have it be a secret-only weapon with very scarce secret-only ammo. Also, 25 round max instead of 50. Next, I want to bring something back from the second encounter, the flamethrower. This weapon would have been perfect for the overwhelming mobs of processed Nars and spiders in Serious Sam 4. For its weapon mod, we'll give it a napalm launcher to light a spot on the floor to set rushing enemies on fire. Next is the laser gun. The Death Ray will be removed and replaced by the Destroyer Blade from the Doom Eternal Ballista. This way, you can get powerful crowd control without any harmful splash damage. The weapon's ammo will be 400 and each blade will use 40 electricity. The next weapon is the Sniper Rifle. It will have 40 rounds and have no clip like pre-Serious Sam 4. Also, the scope should be like its pre-Serious Sam 4 version and highlight over enemies. The upgrade will be a thermal scope so you can see enemies better in dark areas or camouflaged foliage. Now we come to the cannon. No changes or upgrades needed, only 30 balls instead of 40. This will be the overall arsenal. However, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that C4 is missing. That's because I'm going to remove C4 since I explained that cluster grenades and lock-on rockets make C4's purpose redundant. But I'm going to add a new feature to compensate for its removal. For the first time since Serious Sam 2, we will bring back hand grenades. This way you can get crowd control or heavy damage on enemies immediately without having to shuffle through your weapons. But instead of a 30 grenade capacity, it will be 15. Now that we have the arsenal down, it's time to go back and explain why I wanted to remove dual wielding. The best way to explain this is to bring up the balance of bullshit I mentioned in the previous video. The way to balance out most of the bullshit was with the overpowered gadgets. But I also think dual wielding was a way to do that too. With so many enemies, you'll need to unload as much ammo into the mob as possible. And most of the time, the fights devolve into a chaotic mess. So, I feel like with better enemy placement and better level design, dual wielding won't be necessary. Also, you can't activate the automatic shotgun feature on the pump action shotgun while dual wielding it. So, with that explained, the next ingredient to talk about is the gadgets. In the previous video, I said that 4 of the gadgets were 4 different flavors of the Serious Bomb. So instead of bringing back those gadgets, I'm going to bring back the Serious Bomb itself and put it into the regular arsenal like the Second Encounter HD and 2. As for the 4 gadgets I do like, they'll make a return with some adjustments. The Hollow Decoy will return relatively unchanged, but for the Hacked Drone, I'm going to alter it to become a full-on auto turret. My favorite moment from BFE was the introduction of the Minigun. When you come across it, it's set up as a turret and it fires on enemies coming down a bowling alley. At first, the turret can handle the enemies by itself, but as time goes on, the enemy numbers become too much for the turret to handle alone, so you must add your own bullets to plug the leak. So, I want to add auto turrets so you can put them into these epic bowling alleys for support. Next is the Medkit. Instead of having it give 50 health that can overcharge your health past 100, they'll work like the Build Engine trilogy. When your health is below 100, the Medkit will use a percentage charge and heal you back to 100. And of course, hearts will return. But to fix the hoarding problem from Serious Sam 4, all gadgets besides the heart will have a 3 item limit. This will encourage players to use these gadgets more often when they can't carry more than 3 at a time. With only 3 gadgets, it'll be easier to cycle through them to get the one that you want. And when you use the gadget, you will use it instantly without an animation taking up time. And with the removal of Rage Serum, we're going to bring back Powerups. Serious Speed, Serious Damage, and Invincibility will return from the second encounter. We'll also add the Serious Sam equivalent of Berserk. But instead of Sam using his fists like Doom Guy, he'll use his sword. The power-up will allow Sam to send out unlimited slash attacks and even heal him for every kill. Now that we've covered the arsenal, let's talk about the remaining mechanics. As I said, reloading will be removed from every weapon except the pistols. For ADS, the Tommy gun won't aim down sights before the scope since Bloom will no longer weigh it down. But after much consideration, I'm going to keep sprinting because it's useful in getting out of sticky situations and covering long distances outside of combat. As for executions, they were finicky in Serious Sam 4 and many found the animations to be underwhelming. So, accounting for the fact that Serious Sam is not a push-forward game, I'm going to remove executions and replace them with a dedicated melee button. This melee will be able to kill Nars and process with a single hit, but you'll need the sword to kill clears and have a wider hitbox to kill more rushing enemies with a single blow. This way the game won't pause when you kill enemies with your knife. But now, we come to the tricky part, the skill tree. Many people say that the skill tree was unnecessary, and I will say many of the perks are unnecessary, like liking the melee path so you can't execute large enemies. But with some adjustments, I think it can work. First, we should be able to unlock all the perks by the end of the game. Don't lock the player off from a set of perks with only a limited selection to encourage a specific playstyle. Instead, give us all the tools by the end to truly become the hero to save us all. As for perk ideas, here's some I thought of off the top of my head. I was considering the rodeo perk, but after some reflection, I don't find it being useful even if you don't have to sacrifice good perks to get it. As for new enemies, I don't have the talent for illustrating concepts, so I'm going to leave it up to the wacky minds of Croton to come up with them. However, one new addition I want to be included is a variation of an existing enemy. Because headshots will be a returning mechanic, I want to give the wearable 2 variations, regular and helmeted. Regular wearables can be killed with a double barrel headshot, but helmeted wearables can't, so you'll need to use all 4 rounds in your upgraded quad barrel to take care of them. Now it's time to talk about the secrets. Unlike Serious Sam 4, these secrets will be more than just medkits most of the time. They will be the perfect balance of early access to weapons, resource caches, Easter eggs, traps, and companion orbs. I'd also like to take this time to talk about resource management. In Serious Sam, being mindful of your ammo is important. For example, let's say you engage in a large arena fight that uses up all of your rockets. After the fight, you won't get rockets until much later. This is a form of resource control. It limits your resources of one weapon to encourage you to use other weapons instead. But this can go the other way. If you use up your bullets in that fight, you'll have rockets that'll be useful against the hard enemies that were planned without rockets in mind. It's a risk versus reward system, and this system will be the one to keep the game fresh without having to resort to resetting your arsenal. This is also important for the reason of early access to weapons. In the first level of the first encounter, the double barrel shotgun and the rocket launcher are secret weapons. With these weapons, the first 3 levels are a lot easier to get through without being total cakewalks. So that's the basic structure of the refined Sirius formula. But there are a few more things I want to go through before addressing the final feature from Serious Sam 4. First, vehicles. Most of the vehicles in Serious Sam 4 were underwhelming because they were normal human vehicles. So, if vehicles are to be in Serious Sam 5, they need to be like the fun alien vehicles from Serious Sam 2. But be sure to use them sparingly because I said that many vehicle sections in Serious Sam 2 felt monotonous and went on for too long. For the large mechs, keep them like Serious Sam 4, but also have those repair kits I talked about to allow for some room for error. Also, this will be an opportunity to bring back the best secrets from Serious Sam 2. In the levels Area 5100 and Mental Institution, there are vehicle secrets. These vehicles allow you to fight the hordes much easier, and when the vehicles are destroyed, the levels continue as if you never had them in the first place. Next feature, survival. If the dev team has the resources for survival, I hope they can make an improved version of it. While I want to have Sam shred the last of the Call of Duty symptoms, I think survival can learn a thing or two from zombies. Killing enemies earns points, and after every wave, you spend the points for health, armor, ammo, weapons, and upgrades. But if people prefer the classic survival mode, that will be there too. And speaking of classic, this will lead into my third extra point. Because there are many people who prefer the classic encounters over 2, 3, and 4, we'll have classic mode. This mode can be selected at the start of a new game right before selecting the difficulty. What this mode will do is remove sprinting, perks, mods, the Devastator, the chainsaw launcher, and gadgets to make the game a close to authentic original encounter experience. Even the weapons will resemble their original counterparts. Also, we can add Iron Man mode, and you can even activate it at the same time with classic mode for a difficult achievement. Next, for the people who want multiplayer back, I honestly think it would be best if Croteam keeps their focus on campaign and survival. But if their budget can provide it, they can go right ahead and add it if the original modes are the best they can be. Lastly, I'd like to make a proposal for something after the initial game is released. This will be called the Second Encounter. I say this because this will be an expansion-sized DLC where Sam goes off on an epic side quest that takes place just before the finale. Unlike the main game, this DLC will follow the Second Encounter's example in resetting your upgraded weapons after the epic boss fights to spice things up. And like the Ancient Gods DLC from Doom Eternal, this DLC will throw everything and the kitchen sink at you. This will be the ultimate challenge for serious fans. And speaking of the finale, I will close this video with my idea for the final level. As I said in the previous video, the Legion system was underwhelming because all you did was push through a section of the horde of 100,000 enemies just to get to a point to start the boss fight. Well, if Croteam has the resources, this idea can be used in a different way that will be uber satisfying. At the start of the final level, Sam will have arrived on the surface of the planet Sirius and converted a teleporter to bring the United Alien Resistance through. With the army at his back and equipped with a jetpack, Sam will lead the charge towards Mental's temple in the center of a military stronghold. Instead of 100,000 enemies over a large plane, the number will start around 1,000 and increase to 10,000. As the hero unit, you'll thin the ranks for your allies to clean up the rest and push through. But when you get to certain points in the charge, you'll be notified to take out strategic points like artillery emplacements or enemy spawning points. When this happens, you'll use your jetpack to go off the beaten path and fight a horde of enemies by yourself, then complete the objective. Near the end of this level, you'll be able to pilot a gunship to strafe and carpet bomb the enemy horde from above. Then, you'll pilot your mech for the final push. Once you arrive at the temple, it will explode and force Sam out of his mech. When he comes to, Sam will see Mental's true form, a massive Lovecraftian horror. And let me tell you, this will be the ultimate boss fight. Multiple stages with different attacks to evade and mechanics to encourage you to use your full arsenal. And when you finish the fight, a cutscene will play where Mental is on his knees. Sam will then take Excalibur and deal the final blow to Mental's head. As Mental screams, Sam will deliver his final one-liner before both he and Mental are consumed by a massive, time-bending explosion. Then, after a bittersweet credits montage, the after-credits scene will show human explorers investigating an alien tomb. In one room, one of the explorers will find a lone sarcophagus. When she brushes off the dust, it reveals Sam's emblem. This way, Crow Team can continue with the story if they want to make more Sam games. Whew! I finally did it! So, after all of that, I'd like to know what you think of my ideas for Serious Sam 5. Is the removal of reloading worth it? Is trading the auto shotgun for the auto fire mod a good call? Have any ideas for perks? Do you think any of these mechanics change the formula too much? Leave your comments down below and we can engage in thoughtful discussion. So now that I've finished my first batch of voice videos, what's next? Well, there are a few AMVs I'm planning on making, and there are some topics I'd like to talk about in the coming days. And perhaps I could start my own review show to cover the hundreds of games collecting dust in my backlog. But whatever may come, I'd like to thank every one of you for watching and commenting on my videos. It's good to know my voice is being heard and people are enjoying the content I create. If you have topics about games, movies, or shows you'd like me to talk about, please let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you next time!